are the 3 goals. I jotted out, what do I want to accomplish in the time that we have together? And the first was to give you just the information. What is the Mitchell Scholarship? Second was to have you start thinking about the personal statement essay, and that's what the activity is for. And then third is one that I am going to contribute to, but also leave heavily to our guest of honor, which is motivation to apply. Why should you do this? Why should you invest the time? What are the payoffs, the potential payoffs of doing this? So that's what we will be doing today, those 3 things. And as part of my kickoff for motivation to apply, I want to share that although many of these scholarships have not been talked about perhaps broadly across colleges on campus, many UTEP students compete for and win prestigious fellowships just like the Mitchell Scholarship. UTEP has had at least 26 Gilman Scholars, so that's an undergraduate study abroad scholarship. 28 undergraduate and graduate students have received the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program Fellowship. We've had 3 NASA Fellows, 4 Truman Scholars, a Fulbright awardee, and a Ford Foundation Fellow. So you are in good company in your interest in these awards. We encourage you to apply, and my office is here to support you as you apply for these types of awards. So with that, I'm going to start, let's see here. I will start my screen share. Okay, if you could give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about what the Mitchell Scholarship is. We did introductions. So the Mitchell Scholarship, George J. Mitchell Scholarship, is a national competitive scholarship sponsored by the U.S.-Ireland Alliance. It's named in honor of the former U.S. Senator George Mitchell, who played a pivotal role in the Northern Ireland peace process. And it's designed to introduce and connect generations of future American leaders to the island of Ireland, while recognizing and fostering intellectual achievement, leadership, and commitment to community and public service. And the basics: eligibility. You have to be a US citizen to apply, be 18 years or older, but not yet 30 on the date of that the application is due, and have a bachelor's degree. Award benefits. Those of you who are familiar with scholarships like the Marshall and Rhodes, this is very similar. The main difference, of course, is that geographically sending you to Ireland, Northern Ireland, but it's also a 1-year award. So up to 12 Mitchell Scholars are chosen annually for 1 academic year of study, and this covers tuition, accommodation, so housing, and a stipend for living expenses and travel. So important to note here that you can be in virtually any field to apply for this award. Another point on the benefits is that unlike the Rhodes, they do not offer a living allowance or stipend for dependents or partners. So you can apply if you have a partner, they'll be joining you, but they do not offer support in that area. So the Mitchell Scholarship application, put there first up on the list is a letter of endorsement from your university. So this is very important because you cannot apply for the Mitchell Scholarship unless you have a nomination from your institution. And this applies if you are a rising senior. If you're applying during your senior year, you have to have this letter of endorsement. And so I'll talk about the process for getting that endorsement on the next slide. But basically it means you have to start the application process a little earlier so that you can submit your application to the UTEP nomination panel to evaluate it, interview you, and then decide whether you will receive the nomination. You have to submit 4 letters of recommendation, and then the centerpiece of the application is the personal statement. Personal statement is that document where you introduce yourself to the committee. You talk about your goals and passions, why you chose to apply to this program and why it's right for you. And you also outline your plans for the future. So this may sound very familiar to personal statements for other scholarships, and I would encourage you to think about, if you're applying for Mitchell, other scholarships that are similar to this that use a personal statement, because if you invest in writing this document, getting feedback on it, and polishing it, it can be useful for other applications as well. Other items in the application, pretty standard, passport, transcripts. Different about the Mitchell is that you have to record a video interview as part of your application. So they do that after you submit the application, they send you a link and you complete a video, which you send to them. And then if you are selected as a finalist, they do another interview, which I believe is done over Skype. So if you are selected as a finalist, you'll have to provide proof of US citizenship and then official transcripts. Important to note about the personal statement. Those of you who have looked at the Rhodes Scholarship know that they do not allow you, so for Rhodes, they do not allow you to have feedback from pretty much anyone on your personal statement. And this can be a real challenge because part of how we become better writers and express our ideas is by sharing them with people and getting feedback. So Mitchell is a little bit different. So they originally had a policy that was very restrictive and said you could not have feedback, but they've recently changed that. So they do now say that you can have an advisor or mentor give you feedback on your draft personal statement, but line by line editing is not allowed. So this is important to know at the outset because as you seek feedback, you want to make sure that they abide by the rules because you have to sign on the application that you did not receive feedback in the form of line by line editing. So no copy editing, that sort of thing. Okay, and so let's see here. Resources available at UTEP. So you're thinking of starting your application. What do? You start drafting that personal statement and then take it to the Writing Center. So they can meet with you one-on-one, talk about brainstorming, pre-writing, feedback on drafts. You can also attend personal statement workshops through the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards. And I highly recommend asking your advisors, mentors, and especially those who are writing your letters of recommendation to give you feedback on your personal statement. As you near the deadline, you can request a one-time final application review from my office. This is typically done about 2 weeks or slightly more before the application deadline. And that's when you've drafted everything, you've polished it, and you just want that final look of how does this work as a package overall. This is the selection process. I'm going to return to that campus UTEP nomination deadline. That is August 10th of 2021. So that is quite a ways away, but these applications take a lot of time to prepare. So you'll want to start as soon as you can, keeping in mind that you will have to submit a full draft of your application to the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards by August 10th of next year. That's about 5 weeks before the national application deadline for the Mitchell Scholarship, which is late September 2021. I've listed here the selection criteria that the committee uses to evaluate your application. So these are provided by the Mitchell Scholarship. First is scholarship, academic excellence. You can think of it as that. Leadership. So have you shown throughout your undergraduate career that you're involved in community, that you are taking leadership roles, whether it's in student organizations, in research, etc. And third, a sustained commitment to community and public service. Okay, so at this point, we're going to turn to starting the personal statement. There's no pressure on this. When I bring this up, the reason I chose to do this is because I want you to have a chance to jot down some notes, start the brainstorming for the essay, have a chance to talk about it with another person before you start actually sitting down and drafting the essay itself. So I chose 2 questions which will help you think about different aspects of what you want to highlight in the personal statement. What I'll have you do is, in a couple of minutes, is to get your piece of paper and pen or that open document on your computer and write for about 5 minutes the first things that come to mind when you read these questions. So I want you to pick one of the two. The first one is, who are you? What details of your life, personal or family circumstances, history, people, or events have shaped you or influenced your academic and professional goals? So this goes a bit beyond what do you want to do with your life, but asks more, why do you want to do that? So what in your experience led you to what you want to do out in the world? The second option is to talk more about the personal characteristics. So what are the personal characteristics, integrity, compassion, leadership, persistence, commitment to serving others, etc., do you possess that will help you succeed in your chosen field of study or profession? And then very importantly, can you think of any examples, stories that you might share with the committee to help them see how you gained those traits or characteristics, or generally to know more about what it means to you to be a leader, to show compassion, to have integrity, etc., to serve people. So with that, let's start that 5 minutes of writing. So without further ado, I'm very happy to turn it over to Travis, who has a slideshow that he's going to put up here in a moment. And yeah, I really love hearing from people who've held the fellowships. I think it gives you a sense of the day in the life and the whole process. And so Travis is now 5 years out from holding the fellowship. And so he's done a tremendous amount in his career. So I will stop talking now. Travis, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, I'll see if I can get this to work.
So you should be able to screen share, but let me know if you're not seeing that option.
Share screen. Yes. Okay. All right. Sorry.
Okay, it's showing your screen now, but it's not.
Yep. Close this guy. Close this. Close this. All right. So you guys can see my screen. I hope.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time. I always like to talk to groups about this. I was very, very fortunate to have this opportunity. And this is Trinity College of Dublin. This is a photo I took when I was doing my Mitchell Scholarship. And I kind of, this is gonna, the focus of this is the Mitchell Scholarship, and I think, but I want to talk to you guys about a little bit more. So kind of starting off, I just wanted to reflect with everybody that 2020's been not the best. This is a tough year, and I don't mean to be a downer. I really just want to say that, you know, this too shall pass, and I'm glad that you guys are showing up for this and coming to listen to Melanie putting this together. When I applied for the scholarship, I actually didn't have an org like Melanie's group at the university, so I actually just crawled Cornell and Harvard and everybody else's sites and kind of figured out how to apply for this scholarship on my own. So this is great. I'm glad she put this together. I'm very happy to be here to talk to you guys. The big thing is that these opportunities will continue to come post-COVID also. And so it's great that you are all here and getting ready to execute, because you're the future. I worked with a lot of people from UTEP at Blue Origin now and formerly at NASA. And so I think the world of the school. You're here to hear about the Mitchell Scholarship. I'll tell you really quickly about that. Melanie did a great job of that already. And then I'll tell you about me, why you're listening to me, why you should listen at all. And at the end, I kind of want to talk to you about kind of the motivational part of this and what sometimes becomes a mental block to people as they approach this scholarship, and why it was for me, because of kind of where I come from and why I didn't think I'd ever go to Ireland. So kind of a little bit of reflection. We talked about this in the personal statement thing, and that's good. This probably one of the biggest things that doing this scholarship taught me is that, you know, especially if you're doing your undergraduate right now, you don't have a lot of time to reflect. And when I sat down to write my personal statement, I had to reflect a lot. And so that's a big part about this. And so this kind of goes more as 2020 reflection. This is all Trinity on the bottom level. That's Cork's University. So if you go to Cork in the middle, and then obviously the Coliseum, which was a trip I took with my wife, and then Frankfurt Christmas markets. So these are kind of the things. This is why you're here. This is why you're putting in the time, is because there's some pretty amazing opportunities that come about for it. So the scholarship, I won't touch too much on this because Melanie did a great job of talking about it, and I assume she would. So, but my advice is here at the bottom. Watch the videos, read through the site, read through bios. It has all the bios, and this, I mean, these are the things I did, is I read through all the bios. It's a lot of the students in my class were political majors. It was myself and another engineering major. There's some liberal arts, obviously, and a lot of others, but there's a good percentage of political majors. They've kind of been pushed into that realm, and I know Trina personally, the founder of the scholarship, and she doesn't care for that. So if you are not a political major, when you read through the bios, don't get turned off by that, because they actually are trying to get more people to apply. They just don't. So that kind of goes along with my mentality of this whole presentation, is go out and apply. Take the time, put it together, apply. Read about every Irish university as if you are searching for your future master's degree, because you are. That's a big one. I spent a lot of time on this, looking through the universities, finding the professors, so that when I wrote my personal statement, I was like, I want to go and work with this professor. And actually, I mean, at the end of it, you do. Like I went to Ireland because I thought they had a great biomedical engineering program. I'd been doing additive manufacturing at NASA in propulsion, and I thought it needed to be transitioned to bioengineering, and it hadn't yet. Funny enough, people didn't agree with me, and 5 years later, now it's everywhere. But that's a different story. Clarify, again, I kind of said this about the personal statement, clarify the justification and need for your Irish study in your personal statement. So you need to really tie that all together. And then how will your future leadership potential and civil servants be positively impacted by your time living in Ireland? Again, tie it all together, how if you get the scholarship, where you go, how that'll lead into future leadership, how you will actually, even the extracurriculars that you plan to do in Ireland, in your personal statement, if you can touch on stuff like that. I have a friend who applied and received a Fulbright to Belgium, and that was one of the things he put in there, is that he's a violinist and he wanted to learn how to make violins. And that was little things like that. Just show people that you've really thought about this, that you really, really want to do this, that you didn't just kind of stumble upon this. That has a big representation. And then at the end, kind of what's your professional overall societal impact as the leader that you're going to be. Serious reflection time. The reason I put this at the bottom is because, like I said, I sat down for this scholarship and really reflected, and it was probably the first time in honestly like 4 years after I'd been doing my undergrad. I mean, everything gets so busy. I think everybody knows this. And I sat down and I was like, I'm going to graduate at the end of this year. What do I really want to do? What is it that I really want to go and do with my life? And there was some. It was actually great, and I've continued to do it since then, and it's led me on some pretty crazy experiences. My story, President Heather Wilson was the president of my university at this time. She's now the president of your university. She's a Rhodes Scholar herself. She presented to my university on prestigious scholarships, very much like this that we're talking about right now. And that's why I say that's why I'm happy to do this, because if just one of you goes out and applies for this, I think that's a win for me. Because after the presentation, I approached President Wilson and I said, hey, I think I want to apply for this Mitchell. I ended up writing 32, I think that's a little bit south actually. I think it was closer to 50 versions of my personal statement, over and over and over, wordsmithing. You have 1,000 words, you will figure out what synonyms are, and you'll wordsmith it. And the biggest thing is just just so it says just exactly what you'd like it to say. I'm not very articulate right now, sorry. It's funny, I was actually going to this picture, I was going to submit the video portion. So it's actually kind of an automated video portion. They ask you questions and then they record you and then you answer the question really fast. It's kind of funny. But I was going to do that in our university library and I had it all set up and I had a room booked and everything. And then Winter Storm Atlas hit the Midwest. We got 3 to 5 feet of snow and 50-mile-an-hour winds. It was one of the worst blizzards South Dakota's ever had. So on October 3rd, as the blizzard was blowing in, I went to Best Buy and bought a webcam in one of my friend's 4-wheel drive pickups and was leaving as they were closing. And then I set up this really nice booth to do my video interview in. So I was really flustered. I guess the point of this is that I was really flustered. And then I could have just said, you know what, it's just not going to work out. I'm just not going to make it because there was no travel advised and I had to make it from my now wife's house all the way across town to buy a webcam and then all the way to a friend's house where I could set up this in his basement. And there was just a bunch of moving parts and there was nobody on the roads. And I was like, no, I think I'm gonna see this through. So I got 2nd round interviews. I was ecstatic. Your 3rd round interviews are in Washington, DC. You go to the Irish embassy, meet the Irish ambassador. And then they do interview panel. It was extremely stressful. I was definitely out of my element. As you'll see, I'll kind of explain what my background is. And I received a voicemail when I landed. And I think it was one of the most, it's definitely life-changing. I can very easily say it was life-changing. We landed in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I had a voicemail. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had a voicemail that I had received it. And I was stuck in the plane, you know, everybody's deplaning, and I was just like, what am I supposed to do? I want to jump up and down, but I don't want to be that guy in the airplane. So I just sat there, kind of air punched. Again, reflection. This is my class. I am amazing friends with a lot of these people still today. Matt here on the left, he and I helped him start the Cauldron. It's a Harry Potter bar in London, Scotland, Edinburgh. He now lives in London with his boyfriend, and who's a PhD, and they've built a pretty great opportunity. And I got to be the technical advisor on all the cool Harry Potter stuff. And yeah, Lillian's at Mount Sinai, Sinette works for Google. Destiny's a PhD she's a professor at MIT. Yeah, it was a great, and this is George Mitchell himself when we met him in Belfast, and here's our group with him. So yeah, it's a great opportunity, and making this presentation, it gave me some time to reflect on. Geez, it's been 5 years ago now. That was really lucky. So this is a fun slide. I was like throwing this up there because who is Travis Davis? This is me. If you can't tell, I'm the one on the left in this picture. I just won I think my 6th grade science fair. Fashion apparently wasn't a big thing for me at this time. I don't know if I could get these black Wranglers up any higher, but I was probably trying. The funny thing is both, that's my best friend from back then, Tal. He works as a test engineer at NASA, and I work as a test engineer at Blue Origin. We both worked at NASA together for a long time. Now we both are rocket engine test engineers together. We graduated from Harding County High School in a class of 20 in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. It's probably one of the most rural areas in the United States. If you look up those kind of things on Snapchat or Twitter or TikTok, and it says, you know, what's the most furthest thing from a McDonald's, this is it. Buffalo, South Dakota's like 80 miles from the nearest McDonald's. So that's how they gauge whether you're in the middle of nowhere or not. But yeah, I grew up on a ranch out there. If you would have asked me when I graduated high school in 2008, when I was giving my valedictorian speech, if I was going to go to Europe and study abroad and then eventually move there with my wife to start a medical device company, I would have told you were insane. If you would have told me I would have been working for NASA in 4 years, I would have told you were insane. So I think the big part about this is take the opportunities that come to you. That's a big push on this presentation. So I graduated, went into engineering school, but I had to have a job in the summer, so I went into firefighting. This is what I did. I was a firefighter in Montana. It was great. My crew was amazing. We had a lot of fun. Taught me some amazing leadership roles because it was very, very seriously life or death. I went on to engineering school at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, a very small school, very all engineering. I helped with the career center there. I got my first internship at John Deere, and I think one of my big things in my presentations is always also take advantage of the time off. So here I am skydiving. I went skydiving with my then girlfriend, now wife and mother of our little boy. So one of my big things is take advantage of your opportunity. So in engineering, you have opportunities to do co-ops where you take a semester off, right, to go and work with the company. And I always pushed, when I worked at the Career Center, I always said, that you should really think about doing this. So this year I did the summer at John Deere and I did the fall at Caterpillar. So I took the semester off and I went and worked for Caterpillar in Illinois. Great opportunity, which led into the spring where I went to NASA. So I took a whole year off and I did co-ops. And a lot of people were like, oh, you're gonna, now you're gonna graduate in 5 years and people are gonna look at your resume and they're gonna think you're an idiot. And I was like, we'll see how that goes. So take the opportunities that come to you. Don't care about what other people say. Like those opportunities will stem into new opportunities. And I'll talk about that a little bit, what my view on that is in a little bit. So I was an intern at NASA. This is taking advantage of the opportunities when you're at another opportunity. So we were interns at NASA, and it was when they were ending the area of the space shuttle. And we had the opportunity to go and watch the final shuttle launch of the orbiter Discovery, STS-133. And so here I am standing in front of the orbiter Atlantis and Endeavour as they were getting fitted up for their final launches. This would have been the last time they were in the orbiter processing facility. And I think the point of this whole slide is that there were interns with us that didn't go. They said they didn't have the time. And because we got all together and our NASA advisors said, hey, there's going to be a launch and you guys have the opportunity, you should really go. We'll get you badges, we'll get you tours on site, you'll get to do everything. Because you're interns, you pretty much get free reign. And there were other interns that were like, no, I think I'm too busy with my work. I'm not going to go. And it's the silliest thing I still am gobsmacked at how these people came to this decision, but don't make decisions like that. That's silly. This is one of the most amazing experiences. All three of these shuttles, which I got to see in person, are now in museums. And this was the final launch of one of them. I went from interning at NASA to working full time as a co-op. Here I am working on the F1 engine. It's the first stage engine that took us to the moon. And actually all we tested was this little, it's the gas generator down in the left-hand corner, and it put out 40,000 pounds of thrust, which is about the same thrust as an A320 jet airplane. So the jet airplanes that have 3 seats on each side, the A320 is a really nice Airbus. That engine, that little guy puts out. So I'm standing in front of it in that picture in the middle there. The engine I'm standing in front of on the left puts out 1.5 million pounds of thrust. A cool thing is Jesus Trio was my intern during this opportunity. Him and I worked side by side rebuilding the valves for this program. He ended up staying with NASA, and he's now an integral part of KSC, Kennedy Space Center. And he was a UTEP grad, one of the many that I worked with at NASA and still work with at NASA. The cool thing about this is when I was still working at NASA back in 2017, Jeff Bezos had just pulled up rocket engines from the ocean floor, and they wanted to put a rocket engine next to it. So since I'd worked on this engine back in the day, they said, hey, Travis, can you go out into the storage area and find all the piece parts for that engine, put them all back together, because we want to put them in the Museum of Flight in the Apollo exhibit in Seattle, Washington, next to the engines that Bezos just pulled up from the ocean floor. So that one standing right there in Seattle on the bottom and to your right on the screen are actually the engine on the left when we were rebuilding it. They gave us a week to rebuild it, which is kind of funny. but my technicians were pretty awesome. I just kept telling them, hey guys, this is gonna be a museum, and they were jacked about it. So we found all the fittings. I still think it's neat, is because if you crawled up on that engine today, I know of 3 fittings that are brand new that we couldn't find the original fittings for. And I just think that's kind of cool that I can take my kids there someday and show them that. In 2012, when I was still a co-op, I took the time to get my private pilot's license while I was working at NASA in the evenings. So that was just another opportunity that came along. And my friend and I, from the first picture, actually both were working at NASA together, and we got our pilot's licenses. It'll probably come in handy. I flew in Ireland when I was over there, which was amazing. My wife and I flew around over the ocean, and then I landed. It was really cool. This is my senior project. Not that great for people who aren't engineers, just engineering nerdy stuff. Here I'm at graduation with President Heather Wilson. So yeah, five years, lifetime of memories, 1 engagement to my wife. I did 6 internships, which is why I ended up doing 5 years. I ended up getting 6 job offers at graduation, and one of those being a full-time offer to NASA, which is one I accepted. I accepted the job offer to NASA, and I'd applied for the scholarship for the Mitchell Scholarship, and I'd received it. And so I went to my NASA advisors and I said, hey, I got the opportunity to go to Ireland for this Mitchell Scholarship. What do we do about this? And they said, oh, we just go on a 1-year sabbatical and then you come back. I was like, okay, that sounds pretty awesome. So just be transparent with people, and they'll work with you on opportunities. And if they don't, you'll figure it out. So this was me, September 2014 to 2015. Funny thing is we left September 7th and we got married on September 5th. So 7 days later we got married. My wife's a rock star. I actually told her we could leave earlier because she was visiting me at the time, and she's like, no, let's stay. We're having a good time. I placed in a research student poster. One of the cool things I did is I like speaking. I like talking to people. I like sharing my experiences because I think I've been very blessed with a lot of opportunities that I have, and a lot of the stuff that I've learned. And so I did a STEM presentation on and made it to the national finals when I was in Ireland. They call it Fame Lab. And so I'm still an alumni of that and still work with them a little bit. I think one of the other really cool things about this opportunity is just the diversity and the students that you get to work with. There were 15 master students in my rotation. 5 of them were Irish, 9 of them were international. So I went to school with students from Prague, from India, from Ukraine, from France, from Russia, everywhere. And it was an amazing experience, and we all got along great. From an engineering perspective, I learned how everybody else does engineering, and I'm actually still really good friends with probably 50% of them. I probably text them once a month, I would say, and I stayed with them when we lived over there. Progressing with NASA stuff, this was the first additively manufactured 3D printed rocket ever tested in the world, and I got to be a part of it. I was the valve lead on it, so I did all the valves. That was a really cool experience, and then that led into some patents that I hold in NASA now. Patent on the left top is the patent award, my 5-year service award. We won a group award for that engine. In the bottom picture I won a group award for one of the valves I designed. The bottom left picture is the 2013 NASA astronaut class. So I got to have lunch with this class, the 8 balls is what they call them, and Jessica Meyer and Christina Koch. They were the first 2 women to ever do an all-women spacewalk. I can happily say that I talked to Christina for like an hour back in 2013. She's a really amazing woman. She's from Montana originally. So yeah, they came, and since we were the young engineers and they were the young astronauts, we got to sit down and have lunch with them. Another thing, take advantage of the opportunities that come to you. These are also my faves. My wife worked with us at NASA. She's a rock star, and she worked for the International Space Station as an operations controller. So when you see the people on the computer screens talking to the astronauts, that's what she got to do. So they always snuck the astronauts onto base, introduced them to her and her team of like 15 people, and then snuck them off. And then she'd come home and be like, oh, I got to meet the astronauts today. I'd be like, man, you guys are the worst. So yeah, I think those are some of my favorites. We actually both quit our jobs at NASA in 2017 because my professor that I studied under when I did my Mitchell scholarship called me and asked me if I wanted to be the chief technology officer and co-founder of a medical device startup that would spin out of Trinity College of Dublin. And I said, yeah, I think that sounds like a cool opportunity. And so my wife and I picked up, and 2 weeks later, we were living in Ireland. Our families we didn't tell our families until we moved all of our stuff back home. So we actually quit our jobs, packed everything up, and got home and said, hey, we have to leave some stuff with you because we're moving to Ireland. And they were like, what? So that was a fun conversation, but they understood. But yeah, so this was a great opportunity. I got to go back and I got to work with the Irish, all of the Irish universities from an entrepreneurship standpoint. And I got to do pitches for funding, and yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I got the opportunity to come back and work for Blue Origin as a rocket test engineer. So I'm still the technology officer for this company. I just do it part-time, and I still have contacts with all my colleagues in Ireland, and still tag up with them probably once a week. So this is some of entrepreneurship's a big part of my life. So this has been some of the companies my wife and I have started. My wife's company is Diaspen. She's a type 1 diabetic, so she kind of focuses on that. Davis D4, we're both engineers, so we do consulting. Starling Surgical was the company before. Intern Spaces is for student housing, and then the Cauldrons, the Harry Potter pub in Western Europe that I'm an advisor on. And then now I work for Blue Origin as a test engineer, and I work with a lot of UTEP, a lot of UTEP students. My manager's a UTEP alumni, Javier Chaparro. And yeah, I couldn't be happier. We've been back in the US since January, and testing rocket engines. This is the rocket. This isn't ours. This is the F1 that took us to the moon. This is about all I can show you about Blue Origin stuff. So I apologize for that. But that's where I am today. So I guess the whole reason I kind of blabbed through all of that is I wanted to get into kind of pushing you to apply for these scholarships. And I wanted to say, you know, this is a background that I've had, because I tell people to take some pretty crazy leaps sometimes. And I think people are like, yeah, okay, I don't know who you are, so I don't know why I should listen to you. And so I want to give you some background, some of the crazy leaps that I've taken and how they've really bifurcated into amazing opportunities. Because I always say, you know, if you take the time to do these, my wife and I have this conversation all the time. And I say, you know, what is the worst that could happen? What if you don't do this, what is the worst that could happen? And people come up with, and I kind of wanted to pose this to the group and just kind of think for a second, you know, when an opportunity comes up, what kind of things you know, is it a waste of time? That's usually people are, I just don't have the time. And it's like, okay, well, you're not making a priority then, right? And if these are really important opportunities to you, you will take the time. And the way I look at it is if you prep yourself for certain opportunities, it's not as much of a time suck as they're coming, and you can kind of ease into opportunities and check them out, and then maybe come back. And that's why the next slide is the road of life, and I see it as exits on the interstate. You can kind of take the exit or you can't, but you have to be ready to take the exit. And if you're not, then you can be just like everybody else, and you can say, well, I missed it, and you know, it wasn't my fault because I didn't have the time. And I think the other thing is, and this is perfectly fine, and this is something I harp on people a lot about, is I think that one of the biggest things is actually a worry of what if you do get it. And this was a big thing for me when I reflected on this. You know, I come from South Dakota. I'd never been out of the United States. I traveled some, but my wife, until she came to visit me in Ireland, she'd flown on an airplane like 3 times. I mean, you could call us the country bumpkins like nobody's business, right? And now I've traveled to almost all of Western Europe. I've been very blessed and very, very lucky to have the opportunities that I have. And I think a big thing that stops a lot of people is our deepest fear. And this is one of my favorite quotes. And it's really simple. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I think that's very true. I think a lot of people worry about what's going to happen if I do get this, because this takes me off my goal. Because everybody has a plan. Where humans, we just like to stick to the plan. We're creatures of habit. And so you have this plan, and you kind of see it at the end of the road, and you just want to go for it. And if you say, okay, what if you take this great opportunity? You're like, whoa, I don't know about that. I'm not going to go to Ireland and mess. A great example is my wife and I were engaged at the time when I won this scholarship. And we were like, well, now what are you going to do? And I was like, well, can put off the engagement. Also had to say, what's NASA going to say about this? And there's just a lot of things that can come up. And I think this quote really lays it out. Is at the end of it, it says, as you let your own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. And I think if not for yourself, lead by example, and you can put the obligation on yourself to apply for opportunities that come your way so that you can be a leader for others. And I think when I'm being kind of down on myself, this is one way I look at it, is if I have a hard time pushing myself hard enough, I say, well, if I get this, I can help other people get it also. And this is kind of what I was talking about. So I've thought about this analogy a lot. And I think as you travel through life, you only have a minimum speed limit. You can't go backwards. You can't slow down. One of my favorite quotes is Robert Frost, Two Roads Diverge in the Yellow Wood. You only have so many opportunities. And like I said, you can think of these opportunities in life as exits. And unless you're preparing for them now, you can always say all day long that, oh, I just missed that exit and I missed that exit. And the other thing is you can take the exits and you can get back on to the road of life. But that's only if you want to. And what I will say is what usually happens is you take that exit and it leads to more opportunities and more opportunities. If I wouldn't have got the Mitchell Scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to move back to Ireland for 2 years with my wife. And we wouldn't have been able to meet a ton of more people. And I think it's funny because as I was researching for this presentation, Buzz Larman, if you've ever listened to his Wear Sunscreen speech, that was actually the speech I gave as a valedictorian in 2008 at my high school graduation. And I think it's just still the best. This part of it says, enjoy the power and beauty of your youth. But I think one of the other things he says is wear sunscreen because the medical side effects of sunscreen have been proven, whereas my advice is no other basis than my meandering experience. And I think that's the exact same as right now. You can take this with a grain of salt. You can listen to me or you don't have to. Like I was saying, I think a lot of people, number 3, do not build your own speed bumps or roadblocks. What inevitably happens is people see these exits and they see them coming and they know it's an opportunity if you're eligible for it. And if you're listening to me right now, you got this email for a reason from Melanie, you're eligible. So you can apply. So why would you not apply? And I think if you really, really drill deep down, there's no reason you shouldn't apply. There's absolutely none. And I think the only reason you could actually come up with is you're afraid of what might happen if you actually get it. I know this because I've talked to a lot of people about this, and those speed bumps, you'll start to slow yourself down, and then right as the exit comes, you'll say, oh, I can't do it now because, and that's a roadblock. And I'm just going to say, don't do it. Don't do that. Just prep now and just say, I'm going to apply for this and I'm going to do it. And like I said, detours are okay because that leads to more opportunities, but don't set up your own roadblocks because that's just a waste of your time. Yeah, in closing, thanks for everything. I think the best part of all these is surround yourself with good people and stay off social media. It's something that's just it just pulls you down sometimes. I was thinking about this the other day, and there's motivational speakers and then there's influencers. And I think influencers influencer is not a motivational speaker. An influencer is a reassurance seeker because they pull energy from you. And so surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people that build you up and give you added energy. And all the best. Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. I wish if I clap, is it going to sound really weird? I'm not sure. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. You're going to come to all of my information sessions. You'll just have to pretend like you had different fellowships. That was, yeah, thank you. Especially nice these days with so much going on in the world to just hear those messages and for us to think about that, you know, the choices that we make about how we spend our time and, you know, what can be out there. So let's open it up in the last 10 minutes or so here. Anyone in the room, please feel free to unmute yourself, ask a question. You can put questions in the chat, comments, anything that you'd like to say while we have Travis with us.
Melanie, I actually have a question for Travis. When you were talking about the process to be interviewed and things like that, and you went to DC for that final round interview, does Mitchell cover those expenses? Did you have to front that expense? When you're looking at the commitment, the time commitment for applying, but the time and financial commitment to go all the way through that process, what did that look like?
No, that's a very good question. And that's something, I was in the same situation where I was like, I really hope they don't expect me to pay for my own flight. Yeah, they covered it all. I think I had to get reimbursed for it, if I remember right. I think my flight I had to get reimbursed for. They covered the hotel. And I can say that definitively because the hotel is a hotel chain that supports the Mitchell Scholarship. So it's one that we stayed at when we were in Ireland also. So yeah, and I think it's funny because it was a great experience again for country bumpkin Travis to go to DC and you get to stay in DuPont Circle and travel through all, because you're in Embassy Row. So you walk up and down all the embassies and you're like, wow, this is, and you kind of, it very much hits you that, you know, this is serious. I could do this. This is it. So there's 20 finalists and then there's 12 chosen. So it's a pretty big opportunity. I don't think it actually hits you. And honestly, it didn't hit me when you actually win the scholarship until I landed in Ireland and I was standing in front of Trinity and I had my bags in my hands. And I was like, I think they made a terrible mistake. I don't know what I'm doing here. I think the little add-on to my presentation is don't let imposter syndrome get the best of you, because everybody has imposter syndrome. Every single person in the Mitchell Scholarship, in NASA, in Blue Origin, everybody I've ever met, all the CTOs of all the companies I met when we were presenting in Dublin Castle and in San Francisco and in Munich, they all had the same. So don't let it get the best of you. And if they don't, maybe don't hang out with those people.
Yeah, Travis, I had a question. You talked about it for a little bit at the beginning, but you had mentioned, because like I guess comparing myself to you with the amount of accomplishments and the area of study that you've been in, it's like daunting to be like, oh God, like how can I compare myself to, I guess, other individuals applying? But you had mentioned that, yeah, they're definitely looking for as many individuals across the spectrum of education, not necessarily just like engineers and medical fields. I guess, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's funny, again, so kind of the point of my presentation is don't feel too undaunted, because you are eligible for this. That's why we're talking, right? And that should give you a little bit of a leg up. Again, that doesn't mean you'll get it right away, right? So I mean, but you should apply, because I think the funny thing is when we got the Mitchell Scholarship and we all went out and we'd all be visiting, we all said the same thing. We said, well, we should. When I was applying, I thought it was a 1 in a million chance that I'd ever get this. And I worked with a lot of my classmates were health services majors, a few, I think there were 2 liberal arts majors. There is a push to try to bring in more people. It's just been because of George J. Mitchell ending the Troubles in Ireland and it being predominantly kind of a focus of a DC-based political scholarship for a long time, they kind of got labeled that. And so a lot of the applicants are usually political majors. And so when looking at other applicants, they're opening to other applications. So yeah, I think, Aaron, I don't know if that fully answered your question, but yeah, I think just everybody's open to it for sure.
We have a couple of questions in the chat here. So Mariana asks, what do you think made you an outstanding candidate? Okay, what do you think, sorry, I'm having trouble reading this now. What do you think was what made you an outstanding candidate that helped you become a front runner for the scholarship?
Yeah, Mariana, thank you. That's a good question. I think being kind of like what we were talking about with the personal statement, you need to have a plan. And that's why I said, I guess I didn't articulate it well in the presentation, but when you sit down to self-reflect on this, you need to take the time, and it needs to come through in your personal statement that you took the time, that you understand that this is a big deal, and that if you won this, that you would take on the task. Because also, just as a heads up, when you do, if you do win this scholarship, let's say when, let's be positive. When you do win this scholarship, you go and meet a ton of Irish political representatives. I mean, we went to the equivalent of the White House in Belfast for Northern Ireland and met all the representatives. And then we went to the same in the Republic of Ireland, and you meet the Taoiseach and all of the higher representing. So you need to get across in your personal statement that you understand the brevity of what is going on here. And then also at the same time, tell a story about yourself of why you think you're an outstanding candidate. And it's difficult. When I worked with students at the Career Center and I was prepping them for interviews and their resumes, I always kind of said, you have to write as if you're not bragging and being modest, but you have to slowly throw out brags every once in a while throughout the personal statement. And if you're not doing that, you're not writing a good personal statement. Because if you just write a personal statement answering a question without slowly trying to up what your CV or resume says, then you're gonna lose out to the other people. Yeah, I think that's probably, for me, I think yeah, honestly, I don't know if I could tell you. We actually sat down, the other Mitchells and I would sit down and kind of poke fun at each other because we were like, oh, like, we know why you were brought here. And they'd be like, no. And it's difficult. I mean, you also, when you hear the 20 finalists that you're running against, and for the last 2 years, I would always welcome the class to Ireland because I was living in Dublin, and I would go and meet the new classes, and I still would be dumbfounded and be like, these kids are amazing, because you all get together in this giant political room in downtown Dublin, and everybody's in suits and it's extremely fancy, and they read off all these students' accolades, and you're like, wow, these kids are impressive. So I guess you need to get that across for yourself. Yeah, and I think that's when you sit down and reflect on, and how do I get that across? How do I tell people about myself?
I think that, I can remember being an undergraduate and being told, oh, I should apply for this fellowship or that fellowship, and talking myself out of it. And I think that what would have helped me then, because I went on to apply for a lot of fellowships in grad school, and I'd found the confidence, or at least I'd found that I did not want to not have money to finish my studies the next year. So that pressure was there. But I think it was the process of writing and starting to write and allowing that first draft to suck and continuing to return to it, and just really doing that reflection through the writing helped me build confidence that I did have something important to say and do. And when I was able to see it in writing, kind of continue that conversation with myself and with the people who read my essays, I did manage to shed some of that imposter syndrome, that feeling of, well, why would they pick me? And then I could see it on the paper. I was like, wow, actually, when I look at this after 10 revisions, I would pick me. I remember feeling that, and I won that fellowship. I didn't win the 9 I applied to before that, but at that point I did. So I think that then this is why I am so glad that so many of you are coming to this session 10 months before the application deadline, because you can start all of this now. And
I think
Yes.
that's a good point, Melanie. I think that's really, and I think that's something I probably missed there, is that a way to do that, another way exactly like you said, to kind of help with that imposter syndrome is writing it down. And a way to get that down, because usually we sit down and we're like, well, I'm not really that impressive. Like if I sit down, usually, honestly, when I do my PowerPoints, I put together a PowerPoint and my wife is like, what about this? And what about this? I'm like, those are boring things. I don't want to tell people about those. And she'll be like, well, you should add them. And that's honestly, sit down with somebody else. And this is what I did when I worked at the Career Center, is when I made students write the resumes, I would sit down and I would ask them questions about, tell me a time when you were a leader. And I'd be like, oh, I was never a leader. And I think a great example is I sat down with a lot of veterans that had been coming back from the Middle East at this time. And some of them were good friends of mine. And they would constantly tell me, oh, I have no background. I have no employable skills. And I was like, I find that hard to believe. And so I would start asking them questions about when they were leaders and stuff. And they would be, oh, well, I led a platoon. And I'd be like, that's leadership skills. I've seen people put resumes out where they were, they led a team of 2 people when they were, doing whatever, working at a ballpark. Like, you were leading a platoon in another country in military operations. And they're like, oh, it's not that big a deal. And so you need to shed that coat of it's not that big a deal and write down everything, absolutely everything. And it would be good to work with somebody on this. And then you can go back through and kind of high grade it as you write out. But yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what Melanie exactly said. Is I think the only thing I would add is maybe work with somebody, and it can work a little bit better, and it works a little bit easier.
Melanie, I have not a question, but a question and a comment.
Okay, let me just also post, so maybe Travis can answer it in this last one. The last question from the chat. So Stephanie asks, what was something you wish you knew before moving to Ireland? So maybe we'll keep that in mind if we have time at the end. Go ahead, Tanya.
Okay, so very quickly, Travis, it's a segue to what has been said. First of all, I've enjoyed your presentation tremendously. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I wish I had met you when I was 18 years old, because it would have been tremendous, very good for me also. The question really has to do with something that you said about the 30+ iterations of the letter, of the personal statement. So often we don't maybe trust ourselves, as you said before, the imposter syndrome. Well, that's not what the letter is about. You have to write, you wrote it 30+ times. And oftentimes as we are producing a statement, personal or otherwise, we don't realize, we think our 5th one is going to make it, but it required that level of involvement and editing. Could you talk a little bit about what happened each time, or more or less the periods of time when you had to create the next letter that made you happy, but then you went to the next one and then again?
Yeah, I think the big thing for that was when you're reading through it, I guess go and find resources that are kind of out there, and they talk about how to write good letters. And if you can, I think it's warranted to work with other students even and have them kind of proofread stuff for you. And when you're looking at it, you need to, like I said before, you need to wordsmith this to a point where nobody's going to misunderstand it, and you're getting exactly what you want across. And it's one of those things where every sentence, every noun, every verb needs to get exactly what you want across, and you need to change synonyms. And it's extremely stressful. And I think of it now and I roll my eyes, because I'm an engineer. I shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. And so as I was wordsmithing it, I was like, this is extremely hard for me. But I can tell you that it made me a much better writer in the long run. But I also was so impressed with the outcome of it, because I actually worked backwards on my sentences from the end to the beginning, because then you're not reading it. You're just that sentence is garbage. It needs to be better. And it's essentially one of those things where you need every sentence to say an entire paragraph of information. And it's extremely hard to write like that, but that's what you need to do. You only have 1,000 words to explain why they should pay for you to go to Ireland for an entire year and get your master's for free. And so you have 1,000 words to do that. So I think maybe just do not have imposter syndrome and definitely apply for the scholarship, but you need to look at it through this periscope of this needs to get some serious information across, and you'll know it. You'll get maybe the first few sentences to that stage, and then you'll be like, well, these sentences don't match that, and so you'll just keep going through and till you get the entire 1,000 words to the point where you're like, this is it. This is really, really, really good. I don't think I can add, like I was legitimately adding like at and does and taking them out and finding synonyms where, yeah, it's one of those things where when you start writing it, you'll understand, I think. But the reflection of that when you're writing goes into that, because there's a mental difficulty that goes along with it, because you're like, I have so much to say. But yeah, that's how I did it anyways, is you need to wordsmith it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are at time here, so let's thank Travis. Thank you to the staff who also attended. And thank you, students. I encourage you to apply, be in touch with me. So my email address for my office is studentfellowships@utep.edu. And maybe Morgan, you could add that in the chat. Other scholarships for you to consider, of course, Rhodes, Marshall, Fulbright, though, if you're interested in going overseas, that's one where there's over 2,200 awards every year versus around 25 to 30 for each of these UK scholarships. So if you are an underclassman and you will be a junior next year, I encourage you to apply for President Wilson's Hawkins Scholarship, which is $10,000 towards your undergraduate studies to help prepare you for scholarships like the Mitchell in your senior year. So check out our website, utep.edu/studentfellowships, and thank you to everyone. Have a good afternoon.